when we bank on humanity, we restore more than finances. We restore hope, trust, and the future that we all deserve. I'm your host, Janine Kasper, and this is a space where stories of resilience, healing, and empowerment take center stage. Here, we explore how money, technology, and community can be tools for restoration, not just survival. Each week, you'll hear from survivors, advocates, innovators, and changemakers who are reimagining what it means to build dignity, equity, and an opportunity for every life. Because when we bank on humanity, we restore more than finances. We restore hope, trust, and the future that we all deserve. So thank you for joining us today. And let me begin by thanking Unlocking Commerce and Business with Connie Davis for making this podcast a reality for me. Being a part of this podcast accelerator and this first cohort is very meaningful for me to share my voice that I have hidden for many years. And so in this episode, I want to share my journey with you that brought me here and why I'm so excited to have you join me to build a bridge between our banking systems, nonprofit entities, and community organizations. And I am absolutely delighted to have with me today, sitting beside me, Dr. George Viney. And Dr. Fene, could you share a little bit about your background and your experiences in regards to seeing that bridge or the lack of a bridge with a two-way street going from those that have been impacted by trauma and our financial services industry?
Thank you, Janine. I first want to say that I'm so moved, and it's such a pleasure and a privilege to spend time with you in this auspicious beginning in which you radiate this extraordinarily profound and compassionate heart that you have that I have known over many years. So, I have a doctorate in clinical psychology, and I am a practicing Jungian therapist, and I've worked with At Promise youth and families for many, many years. I've been seeing folks for about 35 years now, and I have been witness to extraordinary situations of great tragedy, trauma, grief, loss, uh, that include working with survivors of torture, folks who have experienced wordless, really, types of abuses. And yet, at the same time, after all has been said and done, you could say, and as it's been fermenting in my memory of having worked with such folks, I can also tell you that I have experienced tremendous individuals full of great resilience and somehow find a way to stay standing and thrive in utterly deplorable and unsupported circumstances. So, how wonderful that you are getting together with groups and organizations and individuals and those who have suffered trauma to find a way to bridge their stories with systems and others that can help them thrive.
Dr. Vinay, thank you so much. And forgive me because I have known you for so long. I will likely call you George through many parts of the time or the podcast and the series that we have for today. So, a little bit about me. I was raised in a very small farming community just outside of Austin, Texas. And even though I haven't lived in the state for many years, I still refer to myself truly in my heart as a Texan. And the opportunity to truly be involved in my community in many different ways. So I would say, passion for helping others has really been a part of my heart throughout my entire life. And I think in a way, I probably put that passion on a back burner when I entered my career and that career was in banking. I did grow up in what we called the banking industry back then. We refer to it now as the financial services industry. And really, the roles that people I think really knew about were those in the banking industry who were either a banker, a lender, or a salesperson. And if you were a banker, at least in my mind, that meant that you were responsible for keeping that financial institution's doors open. You were there to ensure the safety and security of the financial stability of that institution. And you also were extremely involved in the back office operations, which ultimately impacted how folks did serve their community as individuals walked in the door. So navigating, I would say, right out of college, not just how to learn to carry my briefcase, but also how to navigate this world of a financial industry that empowers people to live their life, but at the same time seeing a gap, a gap in literacy. And as we all grew up with the ages that we are, having the opportunity to understand what it was to read and ensure people had an opportunity to be literate in the written word was extremely important. And when we moved, into maybe our high school days, we did at times talk about money. If you were in one of the economic competitive groups, but it was more about how do you just manage your budget? And that gap that started a very long time ago, in my opinion, has shaped where we are today. And so the problem that we see is one of people have not really understood what it means to have a relationship with money and not just learn how to spend. And when we talk about budgeting, which is great, we all need to do it, it doesn't really get at the heart of how an individual can live every day. And if someone is not financially stable, meaning they may or may not have a roof over their head, they may or may not have a vehicle to drive to get to doctor's appointments or even get to work, we do find that that gap of true economic literacy is where we find people clamoring. And our financial systems, our nonprofit organizations, they're all making such a great effort to begin to make that shift from just a financial literacy concept to true economic literacy. And it is, um, you can start to see people's hearts today. And I think that that is a huge change in the industry. We still have corporate to follow, we still have our banking regulations that are critical, but we are finding that some of those systems that we put in place that we thought would quote unquote do no harm or create convenience actually added more stress and put people in a deeper financial bind with some of the fees that were charged. And George and I were talking earlier just simply about the concept of overdraft protection. When it was launched after the era of the savings and loan crisis in the 1980s, the Resolution Trust Corporation dissolved over 747 insolvent institutions by 1995, and bankers continued to look for ways to improve their organization's efficiencies. So the concept of creating a sales culture in the branch began to appear. It was also noted that with overdraft checks, that people suffered some embarrassment and shame when they would be overdrawn. So the industry did create an overdraft protection type of service that they charged for. And unknowingly, that did more harm. And Dr. Fene, I think you may have had an experience with that in your younger years.
Yeah, I remember it was sometime early on in grad school and trying to make ends meet and trying to manifest the dream. the finances, we could say, were rather limited as a full-time grad student. And on a particular day, I think the bank account had dropped to, I don't know, some minuscule amount, let's say 50, just to call it up out of memory. And I must have had on that particular day 5 transactions that went through that dipped the account under zero. And these were things like buying a Starbucks coffee and, putting gas in the car. But on that day, each transaction that went through, throwing it under zero, was being charged $35 overdraft charge,
Right.
which added up to this whopping amount. And I called them up and I said, I understand why you're doing this, because obviously I dipped below zero, and now you're adding an additional debt that keeps it over or under zero. How do I find my way out of this? Can you see that I've been a member of this bank for years and years and years, and have a little compassion, or can we cancel some of those charges and I just pay one?
Yeah.
And at the time they were, I'm so sorry, sir, but this is the protocol.
Well, and in that story, Dr. Vinay, when you were going through that period of time in your life, I recall that you had also been going through a significant amount of trauma personally.
Hmm.
And, um, that trauma started at a very early age for you. So as you were working in your field to get your degrees, you were also dealing with a an unusual situation. And if you don't mind sharing just a little bit about that experience, I'd love to have you share that with um, anyone that might be on the phone listening.
Well, uh, life brings you your share of joys and sufferings. Perhaps one to share on this occasion is that when I was in college, between my sophomore and junior year, my father was killed by terrorists in a South American country. And I was 20, and a picture of him there. Uh, 13 people were killed in a outdoor cafe in El Salvador, and this is the time of Reagan. And we received a lovely letter of condolences from President Reagan at the time, but also just to see his body on the front of U.S. News and World Report and Time and Newsweek and this and that. They happened to have photographed him. That was tremendously traumatic. It also, though, one doesn't wish any of these types of sufferings on anybody's individual trauma, but I can tell you from this vantage point now that it gave me the necessity and perhaps even the calling to take up the question of darkness and the human psyche. And I ended up working with survivors of torture in Chicago, and that to sort of give back or help others that had gone through such traumas and empower them, and also attune to what their own psyche was revealing in a healing manner through their dreams. Oh, I just take my hat off to all of these profound and unique and resilient individuals who stayed standing when all they wanted to do was fall down based on their own trauma. So it's interesting, huh? How a story that could destroy you, if one is supported by the invisible ones through friends and strangers and others and synchronicities, help you carry on, you end up finding a way to create a transformative story that leads to attuning and walking with those who have also been laid low by life and helping them find their transformative story.
Right. And through that, um, from your experience in working either on your own or with other, community resource centers, that banking piece still became an issue because um, it was financially difficult during that time, and you found yourself really having to make ends meet in some resourceful ways.
All sorts of things. And you mentioned in our own conversations how shame can be part of it,
Yes,
because there's this idea that if you're having financial limitations or difficulties, that somehow you're not handling your affairs sufficiently.
right.
And so you have to kind of drop your head and maybe it's just our American individualism, or this idea that somehow you need to pull your own self up. Uh, but I had no snowshoe at the time. I remember reaching out to a friend who would loan me or give me a check for 500, and then when I would get my next paycheck, I would pay them back and this and that was very hard to ask for. And I'm so grateful for the belief in me and that support and that generosity at the time. However, it just goes to show you, because I became sensitive to these kinds of things at that time, and then working with clients who at Promise Youth, back then they were called at-risk youth, which kind of already speaks to how there's a quite maybe a compassionate sense, but also a judgmental sense that they're at risk, that
Right.
they're risky in some way. I get it though; it was coming from a good place. But this idea of at promise, I think, already shows that there's a shift in the cultural narrative about folks. So they would come into session, and this not for profit agency that I worked working with at risk youth and families, we would have all sorts of resources, from a gift card to resources that could connect them to financial support. But the amount of shame and suffering, and the mother who's unable to pay for food and living off, ramen noodles and this kind of thing. I mean, there was so much struggle, and there was so much shame around it, and so much disempowerment, which goes back to your discussion, or your touching on earlier, between, what is it, financial literacy and economic literacy.
Right.
In my understanding, maybe you can elaborate on that a little more, is an empowering narrative and understanding of what it means for somebody to become economically literate and empowered by a community understanding of a relationship with money, both individually and within a community, that can help each person rise and become all they're meant to be and love each other, because the stability underneath them has been growing stronger and stronger, moving them out of shame to a sense of empowerment and belief in themselves, and feeling the belief in others of themselves. Something like that, I guess, is what's coming up as you lean into a very, very necessary and important pathway to empowering our communities, our banking system, and individuals laid low by the twists and turns and traumas of life.
All right. And Dr. Vinay, one of the things that seems to be bubbling up during our conversation really is the words that we use.
Yes, yes, I'm very, very clued in attuning to the words we use.
Right. And even something, and I have, worked with a variety of individuals, and they are amazing in what they are doing in this transformation journey in the financial services industry. But I, e- when we were talking, you were discussing some different points about the class system and how our world still today, unfortunately, whether we demonstrate it or it's what we do on our in our daily lives, there still seems to be that class system based upon the words that we're using. And so an example that we had talked about was someone saying, I don't want to, share a handout with you. I want to be a part of something to hand out whatever it is that we're, potentially doing to help. Or even better, I want to provide a hand up. So, Dr. Vinay, tell me a little bit about that context of a handout versus a hand up, and how that relates to inadvertently truly talking about someone that would be hearing that, and what do they believe is a part of someone telling them that they're in a class
Well,
or
right.
not in a certain class system.
I think it starts with that idea that we have of sort of that pull yourself up by your bootstraps kind of thing, that I'm in position of strength and power and accomplishment, and therefore I offer something to someone who is not able to do that, so they're disempowered, so I hand out to them. But that presupposes that I'm in a position of one up and I'm handing down or handing out. And then that reverse way, which is well intended, I think the hand up, like I imagine, the intention seems to be to lift the person, still comes from a position that I am here, you are lower, and I'm going to lift you up. All well and good, but perhaps where we need to go is um, to offer the hand, man, where we're humans and we're all in the common human existential situation, where we wish for each other, that we all feel love. We know what it is to be loved. We know the power of friendship. And we also know that we're all going to euphemistically said, kick the bucket.
Yeah.
Well, we need to fill that bucket, I think, with love, and we're all in the bucket together, kind of like the characters who are going down the chute at the end of one of the Toy Story movies, and they get saved by the claw. The claw shows up to help them, but they're all holding hands,
Yeah.
And how do we hold each other's hand rather than somebody higher, somebody lower? Uh, and one final comment on this. Personally, I can be in a meeting in mental health where we're talking about attending to the sufferings and the joys and witnessing others who come across the threshold into therapy. And in the middle of a beautiful conversation, somebody will inevitably say, well, the bottom line is.
Right.
And what that does is cut away all that we've talked about that has any other type of value, including love, including healing, including some hearts being touched, because the only line that counts in the end is the financial profit.
Right.
Now, there's a place for that. Let us all, be bubbling up with making wealth for each other. However, when it gets like a machete, just mowing everything down to the bottom line as the only ultimately valid point of view, I mean, something really gets tragically lost there. And I think we should just simply, there are many lines, many strings. How about heartstrings?
Right.
And the heartstrings are connecting between us,
Right.
not just the bottom line about, am I able to pay the rent, or I'm able, these kinds of things.
Right. No, I love that point. That is a very good one for us to kind of transition into talking about the heart and what it really means when we are looking at, this particular session that we'll do, every month, the second week of each month, and the journey that we'll be walking together with individuals, and what we hope to share with other experiences. And from the heart, that is where I believe that we start our banking journeys. And from my own experiences and the research that I've been a part of for the last several years, that is something that we really haven't paid attention to. And that compassion in training our frontline staff in the banking industry, people have huge hearts. And whether they are on the front line as a teller or a personal banker or a commercial lender or someone working in the back office, their hearts are really in the right place. So now I think it's time for us, and our call to action is really an opportunity to create awareness. So if there's anything that you take from today's conversation with me and Dr. Vinay, is really that we need to be more educated. We need to understand what it means to have trauma, understand what it means to be trauma informed. For me personally, I have walked a journey with invisible trauma that I would really hide. And in fact, there's a country western song that has a phrase in it that says, zip the dress up and take the step forward. And for me and my experiences from a small community, but the trauma and the experiences that I had, it was really that, I guess, practice and expectation that the invisible trauma that I had would be zipped up. It would be hidden. And I would have that beautiful dress on, and I would take that first step with my really pretty shoes that were donated to me and do what I wanted to do and share my heart with other people through giving. And I was, given that opportunity. The the visual that you were talking about with the heartstrings, I also think that my heart did bloom in a certain way over time in understanding where my trauma came from and how that impacted my relationship with money. We don't talk about those kinds of things because what we're looking at is, what does our investment portfolio look like? How much do we have in the bank today? What kind of car do I drive? What kind of house do I live in? Who are the people that I'm around? And that is great. I mean, you can live your life that way, but it seems like when you do allow the opportunity for your heart to understand what it means to be financially stable or be enabled and move past that shame that you referred to, Dr. Vinay, earlier, and move to an environment of empowerment. I believe that once we get there and we know ourselves through maybe our own temperament and the opportunity to understand that relationship with money, then we can start learning how to budget. Then we can start learning how to use other investment tools or whatever it might be. But I do think that we have another way to help our hearts bloom. And I'm a firm believer in understanding and again, learning more about alternative currencies, looking at different payment methods, and being educated on what will be best for us personally. And working alongside our banking and our credit union regulators, I think is extremely important as well. And to fulfill the mission of this podcast, and I wrote this out just to share, is that the mission is to advance healing and equity by addressing trauma, promoting human dignity, and advocating for financial inclusion. All of that refers to impacting individuals and allowing them to live the life of their dreams and what they deserve. So,
Can
on that note, yeah,
I just
please
ask
share.
a question to flesh out this a little bit from my understanding? What's the end of the vision? Financial
Inclusion.
inclusion. In your long and very moving experience within the banking community, I mean, you've worked at all levels and risen up to uh, very admirable positions of power and influence. Do you find that there was a time, or maybe there's still lingering within the banking industry, let's say, when a bank that somebody approaches, say, who's been laid low by trauma, is trying to obtain a loan or receive some sort of support, um, that there's still a bit of judgment or evaluation from the point of view, well, you don't have things in place, you're failing, or we can't take a risk on you. But I feel like in our conversations prior to the podcast, you really see an opportunity and a shifting in consciousness
Yes.
where those in the banking from frontline all the way up are beginning to as many different paradigms are changing in the culture, how do we return to a real living, vital sense of community that includes those who have been traditionally marginalized or unable to feel included? Would you speak to a little bit about that process in the banking or the systems?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. We do have systems that are in place along with regulation, again, as I spoke of earlier, that was very well intentioned. And in today's environment, we see now those gaps. We see where we have, in essence, missed the boat.
Mm.
And in order to be able to bridge that gap, we do need to be looking at systems. And I am super excited to be a part of a couple of different initiatives where we are being very proactive at identifying what those gaps are and how to navigate within the existing infrastructure that we have today. I do believe that we have an opportunity with our regulators and those that are representing us either at the local, city, state, national level in DC to look at financial well-being as a part of our health and wellness programs. Because as I referenced earlier, that relationship with money, that's mental health. That comes down to how do I learn to respect myself and know that I'm worthy, and in within my own being that I do have value. And it comes back to relating to excuse me, the commerce lead that we have for the podcast and doing this community of different voices with restorative commerce and business in general. That is where, if we can get to that point of awareness, we not only have these small little groups right now that are working to find ways to work within the existing infrastructure, but also to have those groups that see what could be changed and what could be the future. So, in answer to your question, I think that it really is, number one, about raising awareness. The second is getting involved, and whatever role you play in life, remove the masks that you have and understand who you truly are. Being able to then take that experience and open up your eyes to the possibilities.
So that's from an individual who's looking for economic literacy, somebody who's been laid low, needs to be empowered. And then there's the system side, which is there's a traditional sort of financial approach, which is again evaluating risk and protecting a company or a system, whereas you're sensing and collaborating and seeking to cultivate a different paradigm that includes full, I don't know, individual and community wellness.
Yes.
So that when a bank, say, considers somebody coming to them, they're looking at, I don't know, like a casting director seeing a new actor and going, this person has it. I can feel it. And there are probably questionnaires and ways of evaluating that.
Yeah.
What comes to mind is, say, Walt Disney. I once heard, I don't know if I'm exaggerating, but I heard that he declared bankruptcy like 6 or 7 times.
Yes.
And he lost his first character because somebody stole his rabbit. And then he came up with Mickey Mouse. And then look what he has contributed to our culture in imagination and a sense of community. And then you have Sylvester Stallone, who was trying to make Rocky.
Yeah.
He ended up having to sell his dog that he loved more than life itself in front of a 7-Eleven for $50 because he had everybody was saying no to his screenplay. And eventually, when somebody found it and he persevered and stayed standing and Rocky was made, he went to the 7-Eleven and spent days trying to find the person who had bought the dog and then offered to buy it back again.
Wow.
And apparently the negotiation was a little rough and he ended up paying $10,000 for the dog. But he loved the dog.
Yeah.
And somebody believed in him. The system of movie making, someone saw him and saw the value of the script and saw that he could play the lead, even though he had never done anything like that. And look where we are. So at the heart of hearts of what I see you doing and the individuals and systems that you are developing in collaboration with very talented others and visionary others is to create a way in which individuals can be truly seen and witnessed and cultivated and encouraged, and that these individuals who were once shamed can feel empowered and learn how to better manage and care for their financial well-being. I mean, what a significant thing you're onto right now.
Yeah. Thank you.
And may it just radiate out into the world with love and consciousness. Consciousness. It's not just sentimentalness that you're doing here. You're saying, no, here are the very practical ways banks can continue to thrive, financial systems can continue to thrive, but that the individuals can rise and a sense of vitalized community can suddenly come into view with the angels singing, oh, oh, look what's happening, right?
I absolutely agree.
Anyway, I
Absolutely
got
agree.
all excited there
Yeah,
because I'm
that's
excited about what you're doing.
well, it's very much appreciated. When we are looking at our next podcast that we'll do next month, again, second week of the month on a Wednesday, I am super, I guess, inspired by the launch pad that we've created today with Dr. Viney in demonstrating how this podcast can continue to help you individually and be inspired to take action, and not just learning and talking about these types of issues, but truly understanding and digging in deep enough, not only physically, but emotionally and mentally, into just simply asking the question, why does it have to be that way? When we face something and it's a challenge, why is it built that way? What could we do different? You know, if I had that magic wand and was one of the princesses at Disney, you know, what could we do? And in understanding what that possibility is, I think is a part of the excitement for the future. I believe that it is a part of the fire inside of me to continue to do this work and in some small way be able to make not just a small transformation, but an evolutionary transformation of our economic systems, and being able to have people feel how worthy they are. And, you know, within Inspire World Foundation, that I'm the CEO and executive director of, we truly are bringing technology to the table with different partners to help nonprofits with wraparound services and to help those that are looking for that path for true healing to be able to do that. So, again, I want to thank Dr. Viney for being with us today. I'd like to also thank Connie Davis, and am looking forward to you joining me again in the next few weeks. Thank you, and I hope that you have a wonderful day.